What's up, everyone? My name is Alex. Welcome to my first video as part of the VC. This is something I've been considering doing for a little while now, and I've successfully have put it off until this point. So this is my intro video. I have a couple of things to show and a couple of different stories to tell, but welcome. Let's get the business out of the way first. You've probably noticed the title of the channel is Beer and Vinyl, so I can't really show records until I start showing beer. So we're a couple days before Halloween. It's holiday weekend here, and the weather is a little dark and gloomy and stormy. And so figures, since it is a musically themed show and a musically themed intro show, musically themed beer, pumpkin beer, all good things. We're drinking Trogs Master of Pumpkins. Trogs, they're one of these, obviously, craft breweries that is pretty regionally focused and pretty regionally known. If you're in the Midwest, they're out of Hershey, Pennsylvania, I think. But their stuff's just always solid and always really good. So before we continue to dive into this potential shitstorm that is a YouTube channel, cheers. I love the fall, man. I love it. So, how do we get here? Well, first, as I said, this has been something I've been putting off for a little while until I made a promise to another YouTuber. Of course, the promises that we make to strangers are oftentimes the most important ones. It's actually, I guess, my first technical VCLT as well, coming from Rob at Northern Revolutions. Chances are, if you're watching this, you probably know Rob, because that's basically anytime I've done anything on YouTube, it's been with Rob. And so Rob was doing a show a number of weeks ago, and he was talking about how he's a fan of the band Dirty Honey and how he ordered a record off Dirty Honey's website that came signed. And when he received it, there was like some seam splits and some other conditional issues. And so he wrote them, kind of assuming it was going to be one of those, send the record back, they'll send you a new one. But turns out they just sent him a new one. And so he had two of them that were signed by the band. Myself, I'm a pretty big Dirty Honey fan. This is their first full-length LP, with their second one on the way here, being released in a couple weeks, actually. If you don't know Dirty Honey, they are one of these kind of modern-day throwback bands. They pull right out of sort of that 70s hard rock. But really, to me, what sticks out for them is they have that sort of classic sleaze, right? It's like that attitude that Aerosmith had. It's the attitude that the Stones had. They don't sound like Aerosmith. They don't sound like the Stones, but they have that same kind of just stank to them. Same thing with Guns N' Roses. They don't sound like Guns N' Roses, but they just have that gnarly, snarly, just nasty attitude to their music, and I love it. It's hard rock. It's bluesy. It's soulful. And it's, again, one of these bands that I'll probably spend a good amount of time talking about, that is releasing albums today. This is their first record that came out only a couple years ago, and their second one comes out in a couple weeks, but they're just a throwback. So if you're into some of that older hard rock from the 70s and don't really give today's bands any love, Dirty Honey is a great place to start. And so I've been a fan of the band for a while, and upon watching Rob's channel, or Rob's show, he was mentioning how he had this extra one that was just signed. And so I jumped in the chat in the live stream and said, Rob, how much would you want for that other signed Dirty Honey that has the bad seam splits or whatever? And Rob, being gracious, he said, don't worry about it, man. I'll just send it to you. And we sort of had this gentleman's agreement that once he sent it to me and I received it, I would have to do an unboxing. It's the first VCLT that I would get, and I would have to do a live unboxing. So I'm not going to quite torture you all with, cutting it open. I've already cut it open and all that kind of stuff, so you don't have to hear that. And there it is right up front. This will look familiar because I just showed it, but yeah, good stuff. Signed by all the people. Now, I think, funny thing, actually, I don't know whose signature, which one it is, but I think they did just replace their drummer. And so they have a new drummer now, so who knows what happened to this person, but he signed it, and that's pretty cool. So I started thinking, I was like, this is just amazing, because since I've started collecting several years ago, I've started slowly getting into more of the memorabilia and collectible side of things, right? So the signed stuff, some of the cash grabs of, you get an extra one of these or these throwbacks. But the things that have really stuck out to me is if there's an option, and a cheap option really, to get things that are signed by the artist or signed by the band. And I thought that would be a cool topic for my first video, is to kind of walk you through a little bit of stories of where I sort of came from on music, where I came from in collecting, and some of the signed stuff. And actually, as I walk through here, it tells a little bit about me and my sort of origin story as well when it comes to collecting. So huge shout out to Rob, Northern Revolutions. This is just the nicest thing, and I really appreciate it. And yeah, I think just the community factor of all this is just so important, and really why I wanted to be here. So let's dial back time here. Gosh, 20 years almost. This is not going to be a thread, because I'm not going to start a thread on my first video, but I started thinking of, how many of us can name those artists? I'm sure most of us could name those artists that made us fall in love with music. We might have loved music up to that point. We might have been listening every day and having artists that we really connected with, but who was that artist probably early in our lives that just changed everything for us? And what does that artist mean for us today? And so, to me, the artist that did it for me, I was in junior high. I was about 13 or 14 at the time, and I actually can go back and remember. It was a 7th or 8th grade dance, if you remember the dances back in the day. And I remember hearing a song and thinking, wow, what a banger, and what a song to play at a 7th or 8th grade dance. If people only knew what this song was about, if the chaperones would lose their minds. And I was like, what a great song. I had no idea. And so I went back and I looked it up. I was like, who sings this song? I just love this song. And I looked it up. I said, no way. I can't believe they sing that song. That's cool. I love that. I think I've heard that band before, but I have never listened to them. Who was that band? Whatever. That's great. But what a great song. A couple of days later, actually, I was listening to the radio, and I heard a song on the radio. And I said, what a great song. It's like this mix between, it's like hard rock and kind of heavy. It's got this attitude to it. But these melodies are out of control. There's these backing vocals. It's super overproduced in a way that I loved at the time, still kind of do. And it's like, whoever I was listening to, I was like, these guys just have this knack for like, this is a hard and heavy song, but it's like a pop song. What is going on here? So of course, back in those days, if you didn't know a song, you'd go onto your Google and type in who sings the song with these lyrics, and it would come up. And that was when I learned that it was the same band that sang the song I heard at the dance. And believe it or not, they get some shit, but I don't really care, because I still love them, and I'll talk about why. That band was Def Leppard. The song I heard at the dance was Pour Some Sugar on Me. I still think it's hilarious that, it's like the 7th grade dance song. And then a couple of days later, when I heard that other song with all those pop melodies, I'm like, what is this? It was the song Armageddon. Of course, both those songs from a Hysteria record. This was the first band I fell in love with. Sometime between the years of 2005 and 2008, I saw Def Leppard live 8 times in various places. They were the band that I just fell in love with and connected me to everything else. Fast forward to today, it's interesting, and if you know the history of Def Leppard, you could argue that they haven't really done anything relevant since 1987. But, I still follow them here and there. I don't get too excited about their stuff, but I had the chance to see them live a couple of months ago on the stadium tour, and they just brought me back to 2005 again. I mean, it was like I got chills. It brought me back. It was everything. So this is their most recent studio album. It's called Diamond Star Halos. If you don't know, Diamond Star Halos is a reference to T-Rex, old glam band. I think that is in Get It On, Bang a Gong, talking about Diamond Star Halos, and they've always been huge fans of the glam. And so they put this up for pre-order, and I was a member of their Vault, which is basically their free sort of like fan club sort of thing. So when they put it up for pre-order, they said, hey, you could if you're a member of the Vault and you pre-order this, it will come with a signed insert, a signed lithograph. And that was really the first thing that got my mind going of how cool would that be to have something signed by the band. That's amazing. And so I ordered it, and then a couple weeks later when it came out, it indeed came with the signed lithograph signed by all 5 members of the band. Of course, Joe Elliott, Phil Collin, Vivian Campbell, Rick Savage, and Rick Allen, all signing this. And so that kind of, to me, that gave me the a little bit of the bug of, yeah, let's go after some of this memorabilia stuff. Let's go after some signed stuff. I loved that. The record itself is okay. I mean, it's nothing, I'm not going to put it in my top 10 or anything like that. I will say the singles that were released from it were both great. Kick and Take What You Want were both bangers. I loved both of those. And so, funny enough, coming from that, I said, okay, cool, I got this. Where can I go in my storytelling now? Well, after I got into Def Leppard back in those early times is when you start doing the research, you start going down the wells, you start going down all these areas and start learning some different things. And I knew at the time they had this guitarist named Vivian Campbell. I had no idea who Vivian Campbell was, but more towards high school and into college when I really started getting into music more, I learned that Vivian Campbell sort of got his big break by being in Ronnie James Dio's band. For Ronnie James Dio, the Dio band, their first 3 records. Now, there's a long history with Ronnie James Dio and Vivian Campbell, and it's not great history. You can dive into that, but what was interesting is when Ronnie died a number of years ago, the old Dio band, which at the time was Vivian, Jimmy Bain, who's also since passed, and Vinny Appice, came together and formed sort of we're the Dio band. How cool would it be if we went out and did the old Dio stuff? They found a singer, Andrew Freeman, who's just an amazing vocalist. And they went out as a band called The Last in Line. Well, a couple years ago, they played a small club here in Columbus. Just an amazing, amazing show. And afterwards, I actually brought my vinyl sleeves and I was hanging out by the bus. And maybe, it's one of those, like, you just sit out there, maybe you'll see somebody, maybe you won't. But I was really hoping to see Viv, not only because he was in my other, this favorite band, but also he's just an incredible guitarist, especially on those Dio records. I mean, he's a guitar hero for those records, and then obviously things changed a little bit when he joined Def Leppard in the early 90s. But I was out there. He came out. He was the only one to come out, and he was so gracious and so nice. It was only me out there, and I sort of just held these records out and said, hey, Viv, like, big fan, would you mind signing these? And he was just awesome. So if you don't know, these are the first 3 Dio records, of course. Holy Diver, you can see his signature down there. Just an amazing, 1983, such a great record. Arguably just as great, you have Dio's Last in Line, signature there. And then what came after that, sort of when the wheels were falling apart a little bit, with Sacred Heart, 3rd record. It's okay, it's not great, but also he signed this. Those are the 3 Dio records that he was on, and so I just thought that was the coolest thing, that he signed those for me, and I'm just so pleased. And he was the nicest guy ever, so I love that. Funny enough, turning it back in the Def Leppard history chain, if you know, in 1982-83, during the recordings of Pyromania, they fired their then guitarist Pete Willis and brought in Phil Collen. Phil Collen at the time was coming from a band called Girl, who were just a British sort of early 80s glam band. But what's interesting about that is they pulled him from Girl. The person who fronted Girl, his name was Phil Lewis. Phil Lewis would go on to front LA Guns. Now, here's what's interesting. This is their debut. This is Sheer Greed, it's called. I'm not going to say it's a great record. I think it's more the record that you add to your collection, so you can say that you have, oh yeah, this was Girl. This was before Phil Collen was in Def Leppard. There you see Phil Collen right there. But I bought this from a bin in a record store here in Columbus, and I realized it had his signature on it. And it is, right here, Phil Lewis's signature. And so how cool is that? I'm not a huge fan of LA Guns, not really a huge fan of Phil Lewis, but this was just a signed record in the bins that they were charging like $8 for. So that was a no-brainer. And so kind of interesting, full circle kind of moment all over the place of signed stuff. We'll keep it going. This will obviously be a long video because I don't know what I'm doing, but thanks for sticking around if you've come this far. So let's fast forward into the next band that sort of changed the game for me. And I could talk about this band forever, and I probably will in one of my next videos. But the next band that changed the game for me, completely on the other side of the musical spectrum, was Dream Theater. Dream Theater, if you don't know, they are a progressive metal band that formed in the late 80s, but really sort of came into prominence in the early 90s. They met at Berklee College of Music, and they sort of formed as this band of, what if we mixed sort of the intricacies of Rush and Yes and some of those classic prog bands, but with the heaviness of like an Iron Maiden and Metallica. And they would come together. And I remember hearing Dream Theater for the first time, and I was like, this is the ideal band for me. This was this sort of heaviness, but this orchestral music, this complex music. I was all over the place. And so that leads me into the next couple of signed things. Nothing fully signed by Dream Theater, unfortunately, but a couple of things signed by Dream Theater members. So Dream Theater's lead guitarist and has been a founding member forever is John Petrucci, very well-respected guitarist. He has a number of 2 solo albums, and one of those solo albums came out a couple of years ago called Terminal Velocity. An instrumental kind of guitar metal-ish album, but fully instrumental, all the compositions by him. And so this was a pre-order, a special order I got from Newberry Comics, actually, up in the Northeast. If you're in the Northeast, you probably know who they are. But it came with a signed postcard from John Petrucci. So here's the record here. Really strong record if you're into sort of guitar music. This is great. But this is sort of the postcard it came with, signed by JP himself. And so I just thought that was awesome. I don't think I had to pay anything extra for it. It was sort of like the regular retail price, but I just thought that was awesome. And so sort of carrying on the Dream Theater realm of things, one of their original members who just rejoined the band, fortunately, this week, his name's Mike Portnoy. Well, Mike Portnoy, as a drummer, has kind of done a little bit of everything. And what's been interesting is following him through his career, I have found myself getting into his other projects or other musical companions just as much as Dream Theater. And so after he originally left the band in 2010, he went off and did a whole bunch of other stuff. But one of those major projects that he did was he reformed, or he kind of got back with Neil Morse. If you don't know Neil Morse was the original kind of leader, main songwriter, singer of Spock's Beard. Spock's Beard was a band, they still are a band. At the time, they were sort of part of that third or fourth way of progressive rock in the mid to late 90s. And so he sort of positioned himself as this kind of later career prog guy and someone that Mike Portnoy really wanted to partner with originally on Transatlantic, which I'll show here in a second. But to me, my favorite project that they've done together is the actual Neil Morse Band. And so the Neil Morse Band was formed a number of years ago. This is their third record. This is that third record called Innocence and Danger. This came out a couple of years ago, and I went to go see them on this tour. One of the interesting things I'll say is I splurged and bought a VIP ticket. It wasn't too much money. And the VIP was for a meet and greet. So get there, and it was still sort of in COVID-ish time, but it was one of those where people were being really picky and choosy about what types of COVID regulations they wanted to enforce. And one of them that they wanted to enforce and ended up enforcing was kind of saying, hey, I know you have meet and greets, but you will not get any closer than 15 feet in front of the band, and they will not sign anything that you bring. And so I was kind of bummed about that because I had a couple of records I wanted them to sign. And I did get to meet them. They're nice people, but it was also like 15 feet across the room and kind of saying like, hey, how's it going? Like, hope you have a great show. But what they did do as part of the VIP that you couldn't get things signed is they did provide you with a tour small poster signed by everybody. So there you have the sort of band, Neil Morse there in the middle, and then on the far side here you have Mike Portnoy signed there. And so that was kind of the cool thing of, again, Dream Theater as a band really kind of changing the game for me and changing my life, and getting a chance to have both John Petrucci and Mike Portnoy's autographs or signatures is just really, really awesome. So love that. As I said before, and kind of leading into the next two parts here, Transatlantic was a super group, or is a super group, although it's kind of to be determined if they do anything else at this point. That was originally put together by Mike Portnoy, and it was the original partnership he had with Neil Morse. It was rounded up by Pete Trewavas from Marillion on bass, as well as Roy Nastalt from the Flower Kings on guitar. And so this was their first record here, Transatlantic, and actually signed by Neil Morse here. Kind of a cool thing, if you order off of Neil's website when he puts out records, typically he'll sign the first 100 or 200 copies. And so I was lucky enough to be one of the first 100 on the pre-order to get Transatlantic debut on vinyl. If you're into like big, epic, progressive rock, Transatlantic is just otherworldly. I mean, they're amazing. Same thing, this was their most recent release called The Absolute Universe. This is a huge box set of 3 LPs, I think, also signed here by Neil, which is cool because it's on the actual box itself. we'll keep things moving into another artist that really just changed everything for me, and someone I'm a huge fan of today. And he gets talked about a lot in the VC, I think probably more than these other artists, is Steven Wilson. And so Steven Wilson, if you don't know, kind of came to prominence as the leader of the time of Porcupine Tree. Porcupine Tree was sort of really his band. I mean, he did everything up through the 90s, and then sort of late 90s, early 2000s, he actually started putting a band together called Porcupine Tree. But he has since went solo, and I'm a bigger fan of his solo material than Porcupine Tree, and I love Porcupine Tree. So this is a record called Transients. This is a comp he put out in 2015 that just sort of combines or has a lot of the stuff of his previous solo records. I actually found this in a bin in a record store, and I didn't even see it at first, and then I looked closely, and I said, wait a minute, that is Steven Wilson's signature. And so it was priced like normal. I mean, it was a normally priced record in the used bin, but had been signed, and I thought that was the coolest thing. And so Steven Wilson remains just one of my favorite artists of all time, and is just amazing. Lastly, to round out the sort of signing and the autographs and all that kind of stuff, and with a plea, I think a little bit too. You know, I was on a live stream the other night, and we were sort of talking about how we need to give older bands who are still putting out new records a chance on these, because they're great records. And just because they might not have your favorite original member anymore, or just because it's not 1973 anymore, doesn't mean that these bands are not amazing and still putting out great stuff. One of these bands, another progressive metal band, has had a lot of, I think, band drama. As it currently sits, they only have 2 original members, which does not include their original singer, which everybody loved and had sort of become one of the greatest voices in progressive metal. And that band is Queensryche. And so Queensryche's interesting. They only do have the 2 original members, the bassist Eddie Jackson and the guitarist Michael Wilton, but they've rounded out the band with a lot of really great members, specifically their singer Todd LaTorre. Their most recent record that they put out a couple years ago is called Digital Noise Alliance, DNA. I saw them here in Columbus, I guess last year, maybe in the fall. Hard to say, it was a while ago. Oh, wait, maybe it was the spring. It doesn't matter. But they had this at their merch table. I hadn't bought the new record yet, and I said, wow, it's signed by everybody? I'm in. This is a really, really strong record. You know, one of my favorite YouTube channels is Sea of Tranquility. Pete just does an amazing job and just an inspiration for music fans everywhere. And he put this record, I believe, as the top record of last year. Just incredible. If you're sitting there going, oh, if it doesn't have Jeff Tate, I don't want Queensryche, challenge you or, you know, encourage you to check this out. So just classic, heavy, hard, progressive metal. Just great stuff. And this is a cool piece of the collection signed by the band for Digital Noise Alliance. So yeah, there's that. You know, that's about it in terms of what I have signed. That was just a little bit of my collection and sort of my story of some of the music I'm into and how I got here, and a little bit more about me. I want to give a shout out. Obviously, I shouted out Rob earlier for his encouragement and sending this to me. That's Rob at Northern Revolutions. But I also want to shout out a number of other people who have just been really encouraging to me. And that's Steve from All the World's a Stage. He's been great. Sam St. John, Glenn Kellaway from The Basement, Trevor at Flat Round and Spun, and Marsha P. All of you have just been so gracious. And, you know, I think for me and what my sort of, you know, what do I want this channel to be? I'm by no means an expert in much of anything, but given where I am and my age, a lot of the music I'm into and a lot of these hobbies, my friends aren't into. I don't know people who listen to Queensryche or know people who are into progressive rock. And so for me, joining this community was truly about, hey, I would love to find people who care about music like I do, who care about some of these artists like I do. And so, you know, I don't do this in order to, you know, get monetized or to be a character or anything like that, but more or less to find community and to continue to discuss these things that we're really passionate about. So I appreciate all of you who have stuck with me this far and watched the video and have done all the things. Be really great to continue to connect with all of you and and go from there. If you were so gracious into, promoting this or me or whatever it is, I would love to hear who were some of those artists that made you fall in love with music. Not necessarily your favorite band or favorite artist, but the artists that changed the game for you and put you on this path. That would be awesome to hear. And so, looking forward to connecting with you all. And just thanks for watching and thanks for being here. And hopefully more videos soon. So for all you out there, have a good rest of the month, a happy Halloween, and cheers. Take care.